So a few months back I started noticing posts all over social media talking about how good Battlefield 3's single player campaign was. And I wasn't the only one. David Goldfarb, a DICE veteran who worked on Bad Company 2, led the single player campaign for Battlefield 3, was also game director on the massively successful Payday 2 and more recently Metal Hellsinger, also noticed. This was kind of interesting because while I have always loved the single player campaign in Battlefield 3, a lot of the discourse around it upon release wasn't very positive. Coming off of the destructibility and humor of the Bad Company franchise, Battlefield 3's campaign felt a lot more Call of Duty, cinematic, scripted, full of big set pieces, and tonally self-serious. I've known David for a few years and we've never had the chance to talk about his work leading the campaign on Battlefield 3, so I thought this was the perfect excuse to both examine the design of BF3's campaign and the strange nostalgia people are now starting to feel for this era of game design. What's going on at the moment with people suddenly spamming you and the world with Battlefield 3 footage going like, we used to make good games back to, god damn it.
Jesus, I don't know, it feels like it's a thing that, I don't think it's specific to BF. It's just like a thing where everybody, I think we're all in crisis right now. Like and like just hoping, grasping for anything when times were simpler and life was better and the games were felt better to us. And I think BF is a big part of a lot of people's, like, oh man, remember those times when I would just sit there drinking a beer, playing, smoking weed, skipping class. Like, because that's what I want. Like, why? Of course. I would love to go back to whenever that was, 2011 or earlier, and just enjoy those times, because they did feel very different than, now. So I think people are, I don't know, I think it is this like wave of nostalgia that social media reinforces. And the industry's in crisis, so all of those things collectively probably make people like, take me back, man. Take me back. I'm ready to go back. Jesus.
Good effect on target. We good? We're good.
I had left Killzone 2 because I was unhappy with something. This is a tradition, I think, with the direction. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm leaving. And then I think a friend of mine who happened to be at DICE was like, hey, we're hiring for this game. He said, it's kind of in your wheelhouse. You like this sort of stuff, and they're starting on the second game. I really liked Stockholm, and I thought the people at DICE were super cool, and I wound up getting a job, and then I came out there. The first thing that happened was the project got delayed, BC1. And then, so the project I was supposed to start on didn't start. Like BC2 just got pushed out. And the next thing that happened, and I remember this very clearly, we were working on the extension for BC1, and Call of Duty 4 came out, Modern Warfare, and we were just all sitting there looking at it like, fuck. And we were making a completely different game, so it wasn't even fair for us to compare ourselves to them. But of course, that's what happens. So I think we decided to delay it. And I can't remember where in the timeline this was, and I'm sure there are DICE people who will correct me and I'll be wrong. But I feel like the delay happened when COD 4 hit, and we were like, we need another few months to make this better.
Like, Bad Company had its own thing going on. Like, I remember enjoying both of those games for very different reasons and never feeling like I needed to compare them at all. The dialogue and the destructibility, like, there was so much going on in that game you'd never seen before. I still remember You Smell Very Clean.
Hey, how you doing? You smell very clean.
My name's Redford. You can call me that.
It's kind of got like a Three Kings vibe to it or something.
Yeah. I mean, that was the Three Kings and Kelly's Heroes was a big influence. But yeah, the first game was super funny. It was not COD at all. The fact that we had that anxiety was good in one way and bad, in another. We finished BC1, and I think the EP at the time said, okay, we're gonna fix all the shit we did wrong in BC1, take what we did, fix all the stuff that we wanted to get right in the first game, and then I don't think make it more like Call of Duty was explicit, but make it more spectacular and cinematic was something that we talked about. And it was something that came both from the kind of executive leadership, but I think there was this desire on our side as a design team, and also just like generally to be like, what can we actually do to kind of step it up now that we know the tools, now that we're more familiar with like how stuff works, and get it out pretty soon. I mean, I don't remember how long the dev was, but it wasn't that long. It was like 2.5 years, I think. And then somehow we finally got going on BC2. That was super fun because nobody knew what we were doing kind of in the studio for I mean, they knew obviously we were making this game, but there was like everybody was working on at the time the big project pretty much, which was what was then BF3. It was a very different BF3 though. It was like, like more of an MMO really.
The original Battlefield 3 was not the Battlefield 3 that came out. The project, codenamed Venice, was the studio's main push for a number of years, an attempt to make a large-scale Battlefield experience more akin to an MMO. Sadly, this project never really found stable design ground and was eventually sunset, and so when the Bad Company team released a second game with a strong multiplayer and single-player component, many of the leads of that team, including David, were tasked with resetting Battlefield 3. DICE had a much more modest headcount than Activision did on Call of Duty, somewhere around 300 people, but studio leadership wanted to create a product that would compete with COD, and so the project was split into 3 separate efforts. The multiplayer would be led by Lars Gustafsson, who had been with the studio since Battlefield 1942 and had led Battlefield Bad Company 1. David Spinier would lead a team working on co-op, while David would be in charge of the single-player campaign.
But that was the kind of the thing. I was like, we're gonna go for physical, grounded, intense. Feels like it could be real in some fashion. Find moments that gave them the fantasy of being whatever, a pilot or a tanker. The hope was that we could get it to feel like Black Hawk Down or like Generation Kill or like some of these asymmetrical combat scenarios. I think we had a bunch of fantasies, I guess you would say, like what do we want to give people? One of them was, okay, you're gonna fly a jet, also because we have them in multiplayers. So we were thinking about how to do that, and the problem that we encountered was, is it going to, because so much of BF3 is about how great it looks and continues to look. But you can't do that, at least back then you couldn't do it really, in a way that would have been economical and we would have shipped in that century. If you had free flight, and additionally, teaching the player to fly, if you're a pilot, it's not obviously we let people do it in multiplayer, but in single player, it was something that we were like, I don't know, because even with BC1 where you're flying the chopper, it was clunky at best, and so I think I was reluctant to do it, and we went back and forth on it, and I think what we resolved was, can we just give people the experience of being there and have the spectacle be the thing? Because we have all this other stuff where you're playing, but we wanted to switch the pace up so that you would feel like, okay, this is kind of a breather in a way. It's like a palate cleanser, because everything else is in your face, and this is like not, to give them something to really take you away from that felt important. So, and that was like Linus, who was like interested in like really committed to he was super into like all these like sims and things like that, and so he was very intent on getting that right, for this mission. And so they started to build it out, And the moment that I remember, the moment like you walked out to the deck, because we talked about this whole thing, but you walked out to the deck and you got on the deck, and even when it was like in prototype and it was gray box, you'd never seen anything like it in a game really before, you know. So we were like, yeah, that's gonna work. I remember we showed it to the studio when it was like had art and, you know, sound, and I couldn't believe. Like, people were just like, what the fuck? Like, how does it look that good? It turned out that was the reception. I mean, I think a lot of people felt like that, even though it's not a gameplay section, really.
Right.
That it was so convincing at putting you there that it was a success in its own right. At least that's how I looked at it.
Similarly then with Thunder Run, like it's another mission where you're in a vehicle, but you've more sort of autonomy in this, it feels. What this was another one of these sort of fantasies you were talking about? Was it another case of, hey, these are in multiplayer, let's get them in here?
You know, it's weird. I think we didn't take like everything that was in multiplayer and go like, we got to make a mission out of it. It's just, but this one, yeah, like, we knew that we wanted to have a mission with you as a tanker. I think I'd been watching Firefly, and at the start of it, he's playing with a dinosaur, one of the characters. He's like, I'm gonna get. I don't remember which episode, but that was in the back of my head. And then somebody reminded me of something that I had forgotten, which was this whole like BF has dinosaurs thing on 4chan or something, and that people were like, why don't you have dinosaurs? Call of Duty has dinosaurs, or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think that people were like, are you guys gonna have dinosaurs? And so I think those two things wound up with me being like, okay, they'll get a dinosaur somehow. I gotta ask people who have better memories than me if that's actually what happened, or if that's me just making a bunch of shit up in my head. I do remember. I mean, I wrote it, but I don't remember how it happened. I think that's how it happened. It was pretty straightforward up until you get out of the tank,
Right.
which I had completely forgotten that we did, because I remember I was hung up. I wanted to do to have like a Noclip charge, which you do. So you get out of the tank, you blow the thing, and then, you know, the guy gets killed, and I don't remember it all. But I think for the most part, it was pretty okay, and the tank controls aren't that complicated up until you get into the city, and then you just have to start worrying about like other shit. Like, this actually isn't a great environment to be fighting in. I don't mean like in reality. I just mean as a player. It's the, you know, right. It didn't feel that good.
One thing that comes up in both Thunder Run and with the jet in going hunting is the use of thermal and night vision cameras and stuff, and that obviously becomes like a really big focus in Night Shift. What do you remember about that? Because I just remember that stuff looking so realistic, like creepily realistic sometimes.
We were looking at all of that footage. I mean, I remember looking at the, you know, stuff that people would probably putting on, what was that thing called? Live Leak? Was that what it was?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so like before the days of, you could just see it on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, you know, where people would be posting like war footage they had. So we were looking at a lot of that stuff.
One 3 is set, over.
Let's see, Night Shift is the one that starts with like I remember this was it was a long level, and there was a lot of stuff going on. It starts with you shooting out the lights, which ironically the Osprey immediately illuminates like 5 seconds later. So that didn't make a lot of logical sense. But whatever. It's Hollywood. I don't remember much about Night Shift actually. I do remember that it was one of the more difficult levels to make. The people did seem to like it when we did, you know, playtests. People enjoy sniping, I think, just period.
Roger, use thermal.
Nah, I know you need
French Canadians, they're good.
Swordbreaker and Uprising are sort of a little duet at the start as well. You mentioned Generation Kill earlier, and that for
Yeah.
sure, like I can see the connection there.
We had to source a lot of stuff and make up a bunch of stuff, and I think some stuff we got right, and some stuff there you can look online. People will be like, that is completely fucking not what that is. Terran doesn't look like that at all, for instance. So I think we definitely took some license when it came to like making spaces and stuff like that. Swordbreaker, I don't even know. I don't know what that's exactly based on. I would have to ask Gustav, who was the art director at the time. I don't even know if he would tell me. He's the one who's responsible for both BC2 and BF3 looking as great as it did as an art director. What we were attempting to do was, portray a feeling rather than a place. And to the extent that we succeeded, I guess, it was okay. But, I don't know that I would make the same decisions now about doing any of those things, really. One of the things that I don't know, maybe this is interesting. We also had a bunch of assets that were kind of left over from Venice. One of them was Paris.
Несколько человек узнает о том, что мы сделали для человечества.
So it was like, what are we going to do with Paris? And then I was like, well, we clearly need to make a SP mission in Paris. Well, what's it going to be? Well, it can't be the US. Who's it going to be? Well, we do have these other factions. Okay, so then it's going to be Spetsnaz. And then I was very like, oh, it's got to be in Russian, can't be in... I'm not going to do some fucking bullshit. Like, the whole mission's got to be in Russian.
Me, that is like that's like top 5 single player levels I've ever experienced. It was
really,
so, yeah.
What? I'm just curious. What is it about that? Because like I can't play any of them without going, oh god, the AI is so broken. Like that, it's just, like
I think it's like there's something about like guns being shot inside of contemporary buildings that sounds very violent or something.
Yeah.
It feels very like, oh fuck, we're not supposed to. These aren't
that.
supposed to be here. It's like a heat kind of feel.
Yeah, we were actually going for that whole thing when we were especially out on the streets. And we also knew that we wanted to have some destruction because, we missed it from BC2 and we didn't have as much in BF3.
And then just from a narrative perspective as well, obviously it's a shocking ending at the end when the nuke goes off. That whole thing, actually, the sort of fight on the train platform and that, because it's in a way it's like a shocking way to end. Like you've just survived this ridiculous scenario, and then when it happens, it's like, fuck.
I knew that's what I wanted, I guess, when I wrote it. I was like, you need to get there and think that you're going to sort this out, and then you're not going to sort this out, and it's going to be very bad for Paris.
I also loved how it was framed, and that like it wasn't... I remember the Call of Duty one. I think you're in a helicopter, so you see the glory shot of the whole thing. And there's something so depressingly banal about how you view it in... Like, it just feels like, fuck. Like, I'm on this train platform with no one else. You realize it's about to happen just before it does. And then even so, you kind of can just see... Like, you know what it is. It's obvious what it is. But it's not like you're standing on top of the biggest... on top of the fucking Eiffel Tower watching it. You know what I mean? There's so much that you did in the game that felt like those choices that made it feel grounded and real, that a lot of games don't do that.
I'm glad that you feel that way. That was the hope, that we would not cut to the mushroom cloud. So yeah, that was a cool mission though. I liked it. One of the big things that made, I think, BF3 as impactful as it was that the animation quality was so high. And some of it was mocap, but a lot of it was like animated cameras. Like, so that was like Tobias Dahl and these other guys that were just like Mika, who's also at Embark, who were just like, a lot of the stuff that should have been AI was actually animated. So you would see run cycles that were just like, there was like blending from a mocap animation into whatever other, animation. I think it was even based on stuff we took from FIFA. A lot of the Frostbite animation stuff, I think, came from FIFA, if I remember right. You really did get like super high quality out of this stuff. And the downside was when we switched from Frostbite 1.5, which was BC2, to Frostbite 2, we had no AI. like for a long time. So what we wound up doing was like animating, like using state machine to kind of solve the problem. But of course it's not the same thing. And we didn't get a working AI until very, very late. And even then it was fairly primitive, even compared to what we had for BC2. So that was a big part of the problem with single player was, we were faking a lot of stuff. But, whatever. We did what we could do.
Was it hard to, you mentioned the QuickTime stuff earlier, was it difficult to, I mean, if you're doing a game that has those cinematic moments, there's kind of no way around that, right? You kind of need to have like, especially if you're having a fist fight at the end or somebody points a gun in your face, like, I guess at that time it was a particular era of people not liking QuickTime stuff. Do you remember any, like, from a design perspective, was it tricky to implement them in ways that felt good?
I think we were again kind of going, well, we want you to have this moment. We know we don't want to have to generate a bunch of mechanics for these things. It'll be too expensive. So, and we know we want it to look a certain way. So let's try this. Let's see if it works. And then I think we just kind of like, we started to put them in to various places, and some worked better than others. But there were definitely people in the team who were like, and I might have even, like, internally, I'm like, I don't like QuickTime events. But I do think they kind of accomplished what they were there to do, in the same way that the jet mission kind of accomplished what it was there to do. But yeah, I mean, there are a million people that are gonna tell me that the BF3 is terrible, and they're entitled to their opinion, and there's a lot of stuff I don't like about it, and that I would change now. So I get it too. BF3 is funny because my second daughter was born, I think about maybe a year into BF3 or so, and she didn't sleep. She had colic for like 9 months or a year. So, and I was working all the time. So I don't remember, I'm serious, I don't remember probably 18 months of my life at all. Because I wasn't, when you don't sleep, you just like, that time is gone kind of. And I was sleeping maybe like 3 hours a night if I was lucky for 9 months. And so I don't remember much of the project. And then, so like when we released the game, I was just like, okay. I mean, I was not even like, I was incapable of processing, and I didn't feel good about it at all at the time.
Right.
Because I didn't really enjoy playing it personally. I didn't enjoy playing the single player, and that's always my metric for like, can I feel proud of this thing? Even though I was proud of what the team had accomplished, and proud that we did it, because it was like an incredible amount of work. But like, yeah, at the time I was like, I don't know, we did the best we could, and I knew multiplayer was great. That was never going to be a question. We took a lot of heat for single player for any number of different reasons. So I never felt great about it at the time, or even good about it for a long time. And I kind of forgot about it, honestly. Like, I didn't think about it again, probably after the initial release for a long time. And then recently, all this revival stuff kind of made me look at it. And I was like, yeah, actually, we did a lot of cool stuff. Even if some people didn't dig it, a lot of people did. And that made me feel pretty good, even though it's 11 or 12 years later, or whatever it is, 14 years later. I look at it now, and I'm proud that we did it. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. I think that's why people maybe are the way they are about it now, is because you can kind of see it through the lens of history a little bit better, that maybe it didn't do everything right, but there's great stuff in, I think, obviously in multiplayer. That single player had an influence over the entirety of the game that I think mattered. And whether or not you were down with the campaign, that tone was very important to the image of BF. So yeah, so I think it's up there. For me, BC2 is still my favorite, though.
آماده ای؟ بجم. Shame. You come to our country to murder us, yet we are the terrorists.
All Comrades, Mystic, we on mission launch. Repeat, we on mission launch.
18 hours ago, I get a call from Homeland Security saying there's a Marine in detention I need to talk to.
Gentlemen, as you know, we're dealing with insurgents crossing over from Iran.
You want us to believe that there's a PLR threat and Solomon's at the head?
You're the quick reaction force, gentlemen. We're trusting you to handle this.
The nuke is still out there. You can't just walk away from the threat.
Let's go find our Marines.
Get down on the ground! I said get down on the ground!
This is not a trial. You are guilty. I know how your fucking story ends.